So perfusion. Perfusion is the delivery of oxygen, glucose, and other nutrients to the cells and all organ systems, and the elimination of carbon dioxide and other waste products that result from constant adequate circulation of blood. There's something called hypoperfusion. Hypoperfusion is also known as shock. That's when our body is inadequately either moving blood, transferring oxygen nutrients on or off the cell, and we are not able to excrete our waste products or byproducts as well. So we have perfusion, which is how we normally work. And then we have hypoperfusion, which is if we're not working correctly, which is also known as shock. So shock and hypoperfusion are synonymous. So cellular metabolism is a breakdown of glucose, which allows our cells to function. Waste products due to metabolism are water, heat, and carbon dioxide. We have two types of cellular metabolism. We have something called aerobic metabolism, and we have something called anaerobic metabolism. Aerobic metabolism is with oxygen, and anaerobic is without oxygen. Which of the two do you think is the better form of metabolism for our bodies? Aerobic. So anytime that we're in an oxygenated state, it's going to be better for our bodies. We're able to produce some energy or ATP without oxygen, but it's much less efficient and it creates much more waste or byproduct in our bodies through the forms of lactic acid and pyruvic acid. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. So you do have like aerobic and anaerobic exercise. So when we get to those anaerobic levels, we're creating more lactic acid and more pyruvic acid, right? So we can have that acute anaerobic time in our bodies, which then we get that muscle soreness, those muscle aches. But also too, if we go anaerobic for a long term, so say we stop breathing, our body starts producing more of that lactic acid, that pyruvic acid, and then we become acidotic. So we do have that acute anaerobic exercise, but then also if we stop breathing, we go into that anaerobic metabolism, which then is much worse. As far as the nervous system, its basic functions are controls and maintains our consciousness. It transmits sensory information to the brain. It controls our motor function and transmits information to our peripheries so we can move around and react to our environment. It controls the body's function through autonomic systems or automation or automatically. So that's all about smooth involuntary muscles or through our autonomic systems. And then it enables us to react to our environment. How many of us have ever touched a super hot pan or object and we just react instantly? So that's your nervous system overriding that thought process of, oh my gosh, this is hot and dangerous. I'm just going to react to it. And that's how our body's creating the impulses through that nervous system. This right here is our nerve cell. These are called axons. How they work is that they're going to line your nervous system on this head of the axon. It's designed to send neurotransmitters. Correction. On the head of the axon, it's designed to receive neurotransmitters. It then gets shot down this myelin sheath and shoots the transmitters down this side. If you look at it, it looks like a hand. So our nervous system is lined with these, and it sends those neurotransmitters for our body to create impulse and movement. We have our central nervous system. This consists of our brain and our spinal cord. The protective layers that surround our brain and spinal cord are called our meninges. There's 3 layers of our meninges. We have the dura mater, the arachnoid, and then the pia mater. Our dura mater is the outermost layer of the meninges. Dura mater means durable mother. When I think of durable, I think of a helmet. So it's the outside portion of it. Your pia mater, a P is something small. A pia mater is a small mother. So that's the inside portion of your meninges. And the arachnoid are a spider-like web series of tissues that connect the dura mater to the pia mater. Also inside of our central nervous system, we have something called cerebral spinal fluid, also known as CSF. What this does, it provides nourishment to our central nervous system, helps with the elimination of waste products, and it creates protection and or insulation to the brain. I looked up Trendelenburg on the break. So for your Trendelenburg positions, it's used most often in surgeries that work on the lower abdomen. And as they place that patient in Trendelenburg, it gives them better access to that lower abdomen. They'd also mentioned that some places use it for shock, but it's not normally like the number one treatment. So that kind of ties in what we were talking about. But it sounds like it's more surgical interventions that are putting people in Trendelenburg. So the brain, it's the control center of our nervous system. It's one of, or if it is the most highly specialized organ in our body, and it does not store its own glucose, meaning it's extremely susceptible to low glucose or hypoglycemic states. It's broken down into our frontal lobes, which is the front portion. You have your parietal, which is the top portion, your occipital, which is the back portion. You have your temporal, which is on the side where our temples are located. We have our cerebellum, which is this lower portion of the brain. And then lastly, our brain stem, which is the bottom portion of our brain that leads down into our spinal cord. The different parts of the brain, we have our cerebrum, the cerebellum, and our brain stem. The cerebrum is the outer portion of the brain. It creates our functions, or the functions include creation of sensation, speech, and thought. Your cerebellum is the posterior, which is towards the rear, and inferior or bottom aspect of the cranium. It coordinates our muscle activity and creates balance. And your brain stem, I like to think of this as your caveman brain. So this is what keeps us alive. So the brainstem is the major control centers for our vasomotor systems. So it creates a constriction and dilation of our blood vessels. It helps or controls our respiratory centers and our cardiac centers. So when we think of what keeps us alive, it's your brain stem and the medulla oblongata. Anybody seen Waterboy? Yeah. What does the medulla oblongata do? Mama says it keeps the alligators so mad because they got too many teeth. So our spinal cord is an extension of the brain. It consists of our cervical spine, our thoracic spine, our lumbar, our sacral, and the coccygeal. The way that I like remembering how many vertebrae are in each portion of the spine, I think breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have breakfast at 8 a.m. in the morning. We have lunch at 12, and we have dinner at 5. So my cervical spine have 8 vertebrae. My thoracic spine has 12 vertebrae, and my lumbar has 5 vertebrae. It's approximately 18 inches long, and it's the main conduction circuit for our nervous system to send impulses up and down our bodies to create movement and reaction. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Does anyone remember what the nerve is called between the C3, 4, and 5? Starts with a P, but sounds like an F. Phrenic nerve, right? So it controls our respiratory center inside of or controls our diaphragm. So this C3, 4, and 5 keep the body alive because it controls our diaphragm or our ability to breathe in and out. Our peripheral nervous system. So if our central nervous system consists of our brain or spinal cord, what does the peripheral nervous system consist of? Everything else, right? So all of the other things that I'm able to move, either voluntary or involuntary, that's all of my peripheral nervous system. So I think of the peripheries as everything else. Okay. We have afferent and efferent nerves. Our afferent nerves carry information from the body to the spinal cord, and our efferent nerves carry impulses from the spinal cord to the rest of the body. So as I touch this hot object, my afferent nerves are sending impulses to my brain telling me this is hot. And then my efferent nerves causes that effect and forces my body to move because of what is going on. These nerves create a complete circuit that allows us the sensation of touch and feel. So we have a couple different divisions of the nervous system. We have our voluntary nervous system and our autonomic nervous system. When I say voluntary nervous system, what does that mean to you guys, or what do you think that does? What was that? Yeah, we control it, right? So as I move my arms around, my voluntary nervous system is kicking in, allowing my body to move. And then my involuntary or my autonomic nervous system, what do you think that controls? Yeah, organs, all of the other stuff that I don't control, right? So my autonomic nervous system influences my smooth muscle activity and also my hormones and my gland. It's broken down into two different sides, my sympathetic nervous system and my parasympathetic nervous system. So my sympathetic nervous system, my SNS, is known as my fight or flight. SNS, fight or flight. And then I have my PNS. Don't say that too fast. Is my feed and breathe or my rest and digest. So you'll hear the PNS, that parasympathetic nervous system, be called feed and breed or rest and digest. I believe your guys' book calls it rest and digest. If you hear someone else say feed and breed, they're synonymous. Okay. So with my sympathetic nervous system, my fight or flight, fact, there is a bear in that next room. Fact, we are either going to fight it or run from it. What are some things that my body is going to do as I have this threat or perceived threat that I'm going to approach or run from? We're ambushing the bear. We got the jump on him. We're land animals, so he's at the disadvantage. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. So adrenaline, right? So we'll say adrenaline, which is also known as epi, and norepi. Okay. So as we have this adrenaline dump, this epi and norepi, what is happening in our body? Heart rate, sir? Yes, we had increased heart rate. What else are we going to happen? You can potentially tense up, right? You have that fight, flight, or freeze. So you can do that, right? So what else are we thinking? So my heart rate increases. What do you think is going to happen to my respiratory rate? My respirations are going to increase, right? What do you think about my pupils? What are my pupils going to do? They're going to dilate, right? Why are my pupils dilating? So I can see better and perceive what is going on. So pupil dilation. What do you think my vasculature, my vessels in my body, my peripheral vascular, do you think they're going to open up or close? Open. Why do we think that? Potentially, yeah. And so I like where your head is at because like I need increased blood flow. During our fight or flight, our peripheral vasculature actually vasoconstricts. So it gets smaller. And the idea is I'm going to vasoconstrict my peripheries. I'm going to force all of my blood into my core, which are my vital organs, so I can survive any insult. Also, if I have this vasoconstriction in my arms and I get bit by a bear or cut, they're not as open, so I'm not going to bleed as much. Okay. So we have vasoconstriction. What do you think is going to happen to my bronchioles, my lungs? Are they going to get bigger or smaller? Bigger. They're going to get bigger because we want that oxygen, right? So I'm going to start breathing more. I'm going to have this bronchodilation so I can have more oxygen feeding my muscles so I can fight or flight if I need to. So we're going to have bronchodilation. And then lastly, what do you think is going to happen to my digestive tract? Do I need to digest food if I'm fighting? So is that going to increase or decrease my digestion? Decrease my digestion, right? Also, have you guys ever had like a nervous, I gotta pees? Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I gotta pee, right? That's just your body trying to get rid of anything that it doesn't need at that moment in time. Okay, so we're gonna have decreased digestion. The fancy word for digestion is peristalsis. So decreased peristalsis, right? So as fact, there's a bear in that next room. I decided we're going to go fight him because we're land animals. My heart rate's going to increase. My bronchioles are going to dilate so I can increase my oxygen flow. I'm going to have increased respiratory rate to increase that oxygen transfer. I'm going to have that vasoconstriction so that blood can pull into my core to my life, like my vital organs. I'm going to decrease my peristalsis or my digestion, and my pupils are going to dilate so I can see my threat or perceive threat. Okay. So that's my fight or flight or my sympathetic nervous system. Okay. Now we're done fighting the bear. We survived. Now we're going home. There's no perceived threat. We get back to our villages. We get back to our homes. Now my parasympathetic nervous system is going to kick in. This is my feed and breed or my rest and digest. So this is going to be the opposite side of that coin. So what do you think is going to happen to my heart rate? Decrease heart rate. What do you think is going to happen to my respiratory rate? Decrease respiratory rate. Do you think my lungs need to expand, or can they start relaxing and contracting? So we're going to have bronchoconstriction. What do you think my pupils are going to do? Constrict, right? So pupil constriction. What do you think my vasculature is going to do? Yeah, it's going to dilate, right? So vasodilation. And then my digestion, right? It's called feed and breed or rest and digest. What is going to happen to my digestion? It's going to increase, right? So increased peristalsis. Okay. So this is what your body is constantly doing every day, all day. This is your gas pedal. This is your coast and your brake. So the way that I like to think about it as I'm walking through life, Remy jumps out of the bushes and scares me, gas pedal, right? Fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, epinephrine, norepinephrine down. Okay. As I realize it's Remy, there's no danger. I'm not scared of him because he's smaller than me. He's not actually a bear. And we're going to decrease the gas pedal. My epinephrine starts to slow down, and then I can ease onto my brake, and then my parasympathetic nervous system is going to take over. So it's this constant gas, coast, and brake. So all it is gas pedal, brake pedal, and that's how we go through our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, our fight and flight, or our feed and breathe. And if you want to equate it to something not super out there, but out there, this is what kept our caveman alive, right? This is your caveman brain, your caveman body, keeping you alive to either perceived threat or real threat. Okay. Any questions on this one here? Yes, sir. What's going on? We have like yeah, you can have this sympathetic tone. And the thing too is your sympathetic tone can happen through real threat or perceived threat, right? So I can think in my head and I can think of all of the bad stuff that's going to happen. People are burglarizing me. I'm going to fail my test and this and that. And I'm going to launch my sympathetic nervous system, which then can create that anxiety. Also too, you can create adrenal fatigue to where it's going to take you higher and higher. How many of you guys are adrenaline junkies? I like dangerous stuff and it gets me excited. So the more of that high end stuff you have, like in order to get this feeling, you have to do crazier and crazier things, right? Or you have to go back to where you are. So you can have that adrenal fatigue too, to where you need to have these crazy things to get you back into that like fight or flight type of thing. Okay. So yes, your anxieties can trigger these type of things. Okay. Cool. Good with this one? Alrighty. So this right here is your fight or flight, your feed or breed, or your rest and digest, sympathetic gas pedal, parasympathetic coast and brake. Think of sympathetic fight or flight, all of my uppers, my parasympathetic, all of my downers or my rests. Okay. So your endocrine system, this is the alchemist of the body. This is the person that controls all of your hormones and your chemical transmitters throughout your body. It has a group of ductless glands that release hormones to create homeostasis or the regulation of our bodies. It discharges secretions directly into the bloodstream, which then will either create people's growth, changes in mentality, emotional, physical, and or sexual behaviors. We have the pineal, thyroid, parathyroid, and the adrenal glands. The, the pineal The pineal gland produces melatonin in our bodies. What does melatonin exactly? Snoring, right? Melatonin helps you sleep. Your thyroid glands, this helps with growth and development and activity of the nervous system. We have our parathyroid gland, which produces hormones necessary for the metabolism of calcium and phosphorus in the bones. We have the adrenal glands. These sit on top of our kidneys, and these are what release our epinephrine and our norepinephrine. This is what kicks off your sympathetic nervous system. It also helps with the storage of sugars and controls kidney function. We have our gonads, islets of Langerhans, the pituitary, and the thymus glands. Your gonads are your sex organs, so they control your sex characteristics and govern your reproductive organs. The islets of Langerhans are in your pancreas. Your pancreas has to do with the releasing of insulin, which allows us to metabolize glucose in our systems. Your pituitary gland, this is considered the master gland, and this controls all of the other glands through the release of hormones. It controls the thyroid, parathyroid, pancreas, gonads. It assists with the metabolism of fatty acids and some basic proteins. It also assists with our blood sugar reactions and also urinary excretion. So if I were to give you two that I would be pretty good at with the endocrine system, I would understand the pituitary gland and that it's the important gland. I also understand the pancreas because that has a lot to do with, if I talk about high sugars and low sugars, what type of patients would that affect? Diabetics, right? So we want to understand our diabetic patients and the impact or importance of the pancreas. Then we have our thymus glands. Influences the maturation or the maturity of our immune systems. We have our epinephrine and our norepinephrine's. So when I talk about epinephrine and norepinephrine, which one of those autonomic nervous systems am I firing off or kicking into play? Gas or brake? Gas. And that's our fight or flight or our sympathetic nervous system. I have alpha 1 and alpha 2 receptors, and I have beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. My alpha 1 receptors causes vascular or vessel constriction. It brings blood from my peripheries into my core. So when I talk about that the peripheral vasoconstriction, that's my alpha 1 pulling blood to my vital organs so I can survive that fight. Your alpha 2 is thought to release the effects of my alpha 1. So alpha 2 assists in the release of my alpha 1, which is that vasoconstriction. Then I have my beta 1 and my beta 2. My beta 1 increases my heart rate, increases the force of my heart's contraction, so my contractility. It speeds up the electrical impulses in my heart, which will then increase my heart rate. So my beta 1 affects my heart. And then my beta 2 causes relaxation of smooth muscles in my system. It will cause bronchodilation. So bronchodilation, what system are my bronchioles in, or my bronchus? Not pulmonary. My respiratory system, my bronchioles and my bronchus, my bronchi, my bronchioles are in my respiratory system. I cause bronchial dilation, which opens up my lungs to help that airflow in and out. Okay, so the alpha 1 vasoconstriction, alpha 2 affects alpha 1. Beta 1, I have one heart, so beta 1 affects my heart. Beta 2, I have two lungs, so beta 2 affects my lungs. Okay, beta 1, one heart. Beta 2, two lungs. And that's our alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2. What drug do we have that causes bronchodilation? Albuterol, right? Albuterol or Prevento are inhalers. So that's a beta 2 sympathomimetic. It mimics the sympathetic nervous system. So my fight or flight, triggering my beta 2, which just causes my bronchodilation. Do we have a medication, or not do we? Let me ask you this. What medication do we give for anaphylaxis or allergic reaction? Epinephrine, right? So epinephrine is also a sympathomimetic. So it mimics the sympathetic nervous system, causing vasoconstriction and bronchodilation. So when we do these medical interventions, we're playing on different body systems to affect what we want as an outcome. Okay. The integumentary system, this is your skin. It protects the body from the environment. It regulates our temperature. It receives signatures from heat, cold, touch, and sensation. It aids in the regulation of electrolytes and water in our bodies. And there's 3 layers to our skin. We have the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous layers. In theory, an intact epidermis, an intact skin should protect you from any disease process that you expose yourself to. It's designed to protect you from anything and everything. But the moment I have a slight cut or nick in my skin, I have a little cut on my finger here. If I get exposed to something, that is now an opening in my skin or my integumentary system, which is a breach in that safety or security. Okay, it's designed to protect our body from anything coming into our bodies and harming us. We have our digestive system. This is our alimentary tract. This is the passage in which food travels. So from the moment I stick it in my mouth, it goes through my esophagus to my stomach, into my intestines, and I poop it out through my colon. That's my alimentary tract. The main function of the digestive system is to ingest food, absorb its nutrients, and excrete it out of my system. There's something called enteric. So enteric is a route in which something with the digestive system. We have a couple of different digestive processes. We have mechanical digestion, and then we have chemical digestion. What would be an example of mechanical digestion? Or what was that? Mastication, right? You a bunch of masticators. Chewing. So chewing is mechanical digestion versus chemical digestion. That is the moment our saliva touches that food or whatever we're eating to it going into our stomachs and it's being broken down chemically. So mechanical is the process of eating and chewing or chewing. And then our chemical is the breakdown from our saliva, our gastric acids, which will then break down so we can absorb that food or those nutrients into our bodies. We have our urinary and our renal systems. This filters and excretes waste from our blood. This happens through our kidneys. So our kidneys help us balance water and other chemicals for homeostasis. The kidneys filter waste from our bloodstream and controls our fluid balance. Two ureters, which are tubes from our kidneys, which then go to our urinary bladder where we store urine. And then we use our urethra or our pee hole to pee out the urine from our bladders. The reproductive system, this is the birds and the bees. I'm not going to stand up here and say penis and vagina in front of you guys. So I'll let you guys read those ones, okay? As far as medical terminology, this is a specialized language for us in all fields of medicine to communicate to each other. Literally speaking Latin or a lot of Latin roots, but what this does, it gets us all on the same page. Okay. These are just some common words here. So for our lungs, we'll say pneumo. For chest, we'll say thoracic. For ears, they're auricle. Eyes are ocular. The liver's hepatic. Our heart's going to be cardiac. Your book has a list of what, Aaron? Probably about 60, 50 or 60. Quite a few, right? So what I'm going to tell you guys is I'm going to say this very cautiously. Don't dive too deep into the medical terminology flashcards. Just understand the big ones: cardiac, hepatic, pneumo, like our lungs and all of this, like kind of major emergencies. And you're going to pick up a lot of this over time in the seat. Okay. You're going to pick up patients for orthoplastic surgery of this or that. You'll get time in the seat where you can understand some of the minutia stuff. We're just going to have a gross generalization and big ideas of some of the big stuff. So the way that they're used, or the different word parts that we have in our medical terminology, we have our combining forms, so suffixes and prefixes. And this is, sounds silly, this is like 5th or 6th grade English, right? So what is a prefix? Where does a prefix come in the word? In the beginning, right? And a suffix is in the back of the word. So the ability to break down the words can assist in understanding it. The way that we're going to read our medical terminology is we read it from left to right because that's how English is written, but we interpret it from right to left. So ology means the study of. We have a combining O and cardi, not Cardi B, but cardio. Cardiology is the study of the heart. Okay. Also, if we take a word like biology, bio is life, ology is the study. So biology is the study of life. Okay. We also have combining forms. So we have our roots, and there's a combining vowel. It's generally an O. It can be an A, E, or I. So itis. So if we read this word straight, osteoarthritis. Itis is inflammation. Arth is joints, and osteo is bones. So osteoarthritis is the inflammation of bone joints. Okay. So I'm going to read it from left to right. I'm going to interpret it from right to left. We have suffixes and prefixes, right? So epi would be a prefix, is a suffix. Epicardium is the structure. Cardi is the heart. Epi is on and over. So epicardium is the outermost or the top portion or that top layer of the heart. Khan Academy is what I used to get me through medic school. And they have a ton of amazing breakdowns of body systems and diseases and illnesses. Okay. So hit your books, hit the internet. There's amazing resources on YouTube to break some of this stuff down. But I think this is a good foundation. Okay.